Today I want to bring you guys my very first weapon review or spotlight. I'm going to put a heavy emphasis on spotlight because I think it's way too early for some hardcore by-the-numbers reviews and comparisons to other Masterworks, legendaries, etc., etc. But I did want to sit down anyway and share with you my very first Masterwork drop, which ended up being the Thunderbolt of Yvenia. This is a Masterwork Marksman rifle. It is a semi-auto rifle, no burst here. It is essentially the upgraded version of the Scout, and it comes with a Masterwork perk that gives it a 33% chance to deal large electric damage. It's also got a pretty solid set of inscription rolls, so we're looking at +3 damage to Marksman rifles, obviously more damage right from the get-go off of this weapon. We've got +25% drop rate for repair, +13% ammo for shotguns, and +13% damage for heavy pistols. I personally love to run Marksman rifles on my Interceptor and my Ranger, and this is kind of a perfect setup for that because I really enjoy running the heavy pistol alongside of Marksman rifles and shotguns, at least when I find one that I actually enjoy using. So this was as good as it gets for a very first Masterwork roll, and as I soon found out, the glory of the Thunderbolt of Yvenia comes with its ability to absolutely shred through shields and armor. This thing is nasty when it comes to dealing with Dominion Valkyries and Brutes. Those shields that you might have been sitting in the past and plinking away at for, a good 2 minutes straight before you finally tear them down, not a problem with the Thunderbolt. You might be seeing zeros as you punch your way into that shield with those initial rounds, but when you get that electrical damage to proc, you see those lightning bolts kind of strike down on the target. Great little bit of visual and audio design there as well. You'll get 300, 400 damage, and you'll just watch those shields get dropped so fast, man. It also, compared to the basic Scout, puts you at like a 2-shot kill for headshots on trash mobs compared to the 3 or 4 that you might get with the basic Scout, at least if you get that electrical damage to proc. And while it is 33%, that's actually a really large number. If you're putting, multiple rounds on target, you're going to be getting multiple procs within a magazine for sure. And if you're running components that give you boosted magazine sizes like I am, you can tear through a shield and then tear through an entire brute without ever having to reload. This thing is seriously a monster in that regard. I know there are better, high raw damage Masterworks out there that a lot of people have been talking about, and I'm definitely curious in the future to actually be able to compare for myself to see whether or not that raw damage is more capable of tearing through shields than the Thunderbolt. But right now, when you're upgrading from epic weapon drops, this is a hell of a handy weapon to have, especially if you're soloing or if you're just in groups and dealing with large chunks of Dominion shield tech and, even wildlife tech. I mean, for example, if we go ahead and engage what I believe is the Yarnosaur, I forget how to say all the wildlife names, they've got armor plating on their whole, top half in the front of their body, right? If you shoot them with a machine pistol, for example, like I'm doing here, you'll just get a bunch of zeros. But if you go ahead and crack them with a Thunderbolt, you'll get those zeros, and then you get that electrical proc. It basically bypasses their hard outer plating, cuts through that armor, and just starts to deal damage to the gooey stuff inside. That's basically what you're going to get when you start punching into targets with this thing and shredding through those shields. If this happens to drop for you, and maybe you're not a fan of Masterwork rifles, I strongly recommend you give it a shot because it is just a lot of fun to use. I'm also a pretty big fan of the visual design. I've seen a lot of the different Masterworks now, people passing them around. I just got Pop-Up Pump to drop actually earlier today, and I'm really looking forward to equipping that alongside of the Thunderbolt to mess with it. I think BioWare's done a good initial job here. I like the way Masterworks and Legendaries are essentially scaled up versions of the weapons you're getting everywhere else in the game, like on Epics and Rares. And they've got some additional visual flair. They've obviously got that perk thrown into the mix. Some of them have more flair than others from a visual standpoint. I think that the Thunderbolt's a little bit more tame in comparison to some of the pistols I've seen. But again, I think this is a good starting point. I like the unique weapon design. I like the unique paint job and the unique metallic finishes we've got here on the magazine, as well as the guard, as well as the muzzle. It looks nice, but I definitely want to see them in the future start to bake in some unique weapons. And I think they've got a perfect setup here, right? We've got these Masterworks, we've got these Legendaries, you've got them already dropping in the loot pool. They're more kind of in the open, global loot table. So when they do, if they do, decide to start giving us unique Masterworks and unique Legendaries from, say, named enemies, like the ones they're going to be adding in some of the events coming up this week for the Outlaws, it's a great opportunity to start giving us more bespoke weapon models, to bring back something like Jared's Wrath That is a direction I want to see them go. I want to see them not afraid to start to really make some fun, unique weaponry, to make use of their sci-fi setting, and to make use of their PvE-focused experience that doesn't have to worry about PvP balance. Right now, there's a lot of cool stuff here, and from a statistical perspective, some of these weapons are insane. They would never work in PvP, but let's go one step crazier. Okay, let's go one step crazier. That all said, again, I'm still pretty stoked on these Masterworks. I really do think they change the way you play, and they're obviously going to be very necessary as you push into Grandmaster tiers. What I think is going to be the most interesting is to see how people are equipping Masterworks. You know, right now when you're playing on normal and even hard, you kind of just end up using whatever weapons from a personal or role-playing or functionality perspective work best for you. So you might run a sniper rifle and then say, well, I've got to have like a machine pistol or an assault rifle, you know, something automatic. But I think as we get into some of these very powerful perk-based Masterworks and legendaries, that becomes less of a concern, and you're more focused on equipping weapons that have a specific bonus perk that enable you to power through certain situations. You know, so if I'm running Pava Pump, which is all about damage boost on reload, I'm going to use that against targets without shields because I've got Thunderbolt of Yvenia. So those two go perfectly, right? But right now while I'm running Thunderbolt, I've got like a backup machine pistol. I don't even use it. It's useless to me. Why would I use that when the Thunderbolt does way more damage whether the enemy has a shield or they don't, you know? So again, it's going to be interesting to see how these kind of scale up and how everything scales as you get into the harder difficulties and, you know, start equipping pure legendaries with their additional stat bonuses. So there you go, guys. First look at my first Masterwork, as well as some brief discussion around Masterworks and legendaries, initial impressions, if you will. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say if you've been playing the game, if you've got some Masterworks to drop and you want to share what your first drop was or what your favorite drop has been so far. Feel free to do so down in the comment section below. As for the rest of you, the 22nd is nearly upon us. If you guys haven't watched my review and you're still curious as to whether or not Anthem is a game you should decide about or consider picking up on launch, I strongly recommend you check that review out. I think I did a pretty good job of you know, laying out the current situation and helping people understand whether or not Anthem is going to be worth it for them launch day on the 22nd. Other than that, thank you all so much for watching, and as always, try to be awesome to one another because at the end of the day, that's all we've got.